So I worked in a pizza store in Arkansas, and it was about 10 p.m., and I was about to leave when the phone rang, and I sighed. It was right at closing time, and I remember it like yesterday. I picked up the phone, and the lady said all she wanted was just a cheese pizza. So I got in my car after making it, and drove to the address that the lady on the phone gave me. When I got there, it was a sketchy house at the tip of the city. It had about 4 stories, if I remember correctly. So I got out of my car and walked up the path to the door, and I knocked on it once, twice, 3 times, and I didn't hear anything, but there was a window beside the door, with no curtain, nothing. I looked at the window and was shocked to see a person staring at me, and I couldn't tell if it was a male or a female, but the only thing I saw were the eyes. So I dropped the pizza and booked it back to my car and called 911. When I was driving away, I heard a sound in my car, and the car was barely moving. So I got out and looked. I was surprised to see that my wheels were slashed. I got scared. I got in my car and explained it to the operator what happened. Then I asked the operator what to do, and she said, "Just stay in your car with the doors locked. Help is on the way, I promise." I said to her, okay. So after I got off the phone with the operator, I was scanning the windows to see if anyone else was inside. And I looked in my mirror and saw a lady standing behind my car smiling, and I started screaming and ran into the woods. And then I hid behind a log. It felt like hours. I heard sirens in the distance later on, and I was so relieved. So I ran with all the energy I had and explained it to the cops when I got to them. They searched the house, and all they found were needles. Those were used to slash my tires. I just know it. And just know I'll never forget this. The worst thing is, they never found out who it was. But trust me, I quit my job after that. This happened about 4 years ago when I was still in high school. I was told to take the last delivery of my shift. So I got in the car, which was a 1999 Camry, perfect for delivering pizzas. I GPSed the address on my phone. I live upstate in the country, so all of the deliveries were long drives. I remember the sun was starting to set, so it was probably around 7 o'clock p.m. I'd say after a good 15 minutes of driving. There was a foresty dirt road. My GPS said I had arrived. It was an old little cottage-like house, made from entirely wood. It was sitting all by itself in the middle of absolutely nowhere, but the forest. The lawn was completely unkept, as the grass was almost knee-high. I was used to seeing this kind of thing, so I didn't really think much of it. I took the pizza to the front door, and there was no doorbell, so I knocked on it loudly. Within 10 seconds, I heard the sound of footsteps hitting the wood on the inside of the house. The footsteps made it to the door and then stopped. I started to feel a little bit uneasy. I got that feeling that I was being watched, and that's when I noticed there was a people at the door. "It's the pizza guy," I called out. I heard a low, harsh-sounding voice on the other side of the door, telling me to bring the pizza out back. I didn't like this idea. Just going back there? Something didn't really seem right about this. Are you sure, sir?" I called out. He didn't answer my question. The sound of footsteps didn't move away from the door, so I had a feeling he was still watching me. I almost found myself walking back to my car, but I decided I didn't want to get in trouble with my boss. The last time I brought a pizza back, he gave me an attitude. So reluctantly, I walked back through the uncut grass and around the small house to the back. I remember there was a shed and a little patio back there. In the patio, there was a table with 4 chairs surrounding it, and one of the chairs facing away from me. I saw the head of somebody sitting in the seat. I began walking over there and said, "Excuse me." But the person didn't move an inch. "Excuse me," I said louder. Then from behind me I heard, "Psst, over here." I turned around to see a man poking his head out from the corner of the house looking at me with a crazy smile. "Come over here. I want to show you something." I freaked out, turned around, and ran around the house of the opposite direction back to my car, for some reason still holding this pizza. I got in my car, started it, and got away from there as soon as I could. On my way back to the pizzeria, I pulled over to the side of the road and called the police. Eventually, I was informed that there was no sign of anyone having been at that house for a long time. I quit my delivery job a few days after that. I have no idea what would have happened had I had gone up to that man. But to this day, I still wished I had just turned my head to see who or what was sitting in that patio chair. It still haunts me. A man was injured in a car accident and had to stay home for a few weeks until he recovered. His wife was working and wasn't able to take care of him. It was too painful for him to even go outside, so he had to spend most of his time in the apartment. For the first couple days, it was easy. He had a lot of things to do, but after a few days had passed, he became very bored. One day he was watching TV, and he happened to hear footsteps and children's voices coming from the apartment above him. He wondered why children were home because the schools were not on holidays yet. The next day he heard the same footsteps and children's voices. It sounded like there were 2 children playing upstairs. The next day, the man grew even more bored and didn't feel like cooking lunch for himself. Instead, he ordered a pizza delivery. As it turned out, he ordered too much, and when he finished eating, there was still one whole pizza lying untouched in the kitchen table. He remembered that there were some children living above, in the other apartment above him, so he decided they may like a free pizza. So, going upstairs and willing to do something kind, he decided to take the pizza to them. The man had never met the family who lived upstairs in that apartment, but he rang the doorbell anyway. There was no answer, even though he heard someone moving around inside. He rang the doorbell again and noticed that there was someone peering at him through the peephole. "Who is it?" called a faint woman's voice from behind the door. The man explained that he lived in the apartment below and had some leftover pizza left from his lunch and wondered if the family wanted it. The door opened slightly, and the man could see part of a woman's face through the gap. He noticed that it was unusually dark inside that apartment. "Thanks, but we don't want any," said the woman coldly. Maybe your children would like it," replied the man. As soon as he said this, 2 children's faces lined up below the woman's face. The door was still just a crack open. The children were staring at him. The 3 faces were forming a line. "Okay, give it to me then," said the woman. A hand reached out through the gap and snatched the pizza box. The man just stood there. The 3 faces were still staring at him. Then the door slammed shut and he walked away. Something was bothering him. He felt a chill run down his spine. The image of the 3 faces was burned into his mind. He walked faster to reach the elevator. The faces forming a line. He thought to himself. He pressed the button and waited for the elevator to arrive. Forming a line vertically, one on top of the other. He pressed the button again and again, but the lift still did not come. Something was seriously wrong. The faces. He began quickly walking down the stairs. The faces line up, on top of each other. That's impossible. He frantically ran down the stairs. No bodies. Finally, he reached his apartment door, just hands holding up the heads. Safely inside his apartment, the man picked up the phone and called the police. He tried to explain what he had seen. When the police arrived, they searched the apartment upstairs and found the bodies of a woman and her 2 children lying in the bathtub. Their heads were missing. They had been decapitated with a saw. According to the autopsy, they had been dead for 3 days. The police found the woman's husband hiding in the wardrobe. His hands were still covered in blood, and he had gone completely insane. He kept trying to convince the police officers that his wife and kids were still alive. They found an uneaten pizza sitting on the kitchen table. Number 1. The names in the story have been removed to protect the person's identity. They wanted to remain anonymous. So-and-so's friend, a girl in her teens, is babysitting for a family in Newport Beach. The family is wealthy and has a very large house. You know the sort. With a ridiculous amount of rooms. Anyways, the parents are going out for a late dinner/movie. The father tells the babysitter that once the children are in bed, she should go into a specific room. He doesn't really want her wandering around in the house and watch TV in there. The parents take off, and soon she goes and gets the kids into bed and goes to the room to watch TV. She tries turning on the TV, but she was disturbed by this clown statue in the corner of the room. She tries to ignore it for as long as possible, but it starts freaking her out so much that she can't handle it. She resorts to calling the father and asks, "Hey, the kids are in bed, but is it okay if I switch rooms? The clown statue is really starting to creep me out." The father says, "Get the kids, go next door, and call 911. She asks, "What's going on?" He responds, "Just go next door, and once you call the police, call me back." She gets the kids, goes next door, and calls the police. When the police are on the way, she calls the father back and asks, "So really, what's going on? I don't understand." He responds, "We don't have a clown statue." He then further explains that the children have been complaining about this clown watching them as they sleep. He and his wife had blown it off, assuming that it was just them having a nightmare. The police arrive and apprehend this clown, who turns out to be a midget clown. I guess he was a homeless person dressed up as a clown, who somehow got into this house. And he had been living there for several weeks. He would come into the kids' rooms at night and would then watch them while they sleep. As the house was so large, he was able to avoid any type of detections, surviving off their food, etc. He had been in the TV room right before the babysitter came in there. When she entered, he didn't have enough time to hide, so he just froze there in place and pretended to be a statue. I guess you could say they all had nightmares after this. Number 2. On September 8th, we reported clown sightings near Greenville County, South Carolina. There were multiple sightings of clowns. One resident saw one standing by a dumpster at 2:30 a.m. Other children came forward claiming clowns attempted to lure them into the woods with money and that the clowns lived in the house by the pond deep in the woods. Since these reports, officials were unable to find any evidence of suspicious people. However, sightings of the clowns started to spread over to 10 cities across the US. Last week, a video posted on Facebook went viral of a clown sighting in Florida. Caden was driving in his car when he paused to film a person with white, sinister face paint on, standing in a bush along a dirt road looking at the car. In North Carolina, a machete-wielding clown tried to lure a woman into a wooded area, and police presence was increased after 2 children claimed that they were offered candy by a clown if they followed it into the woods. Police have begun arresting people dressed as clowns on various charges. In Kentucky, a 20-year-old man was arrested for wearing a clown costume and hiding in a ditch. With the number of civilians carrying guns, officials were worried that the public will attempt to deal with these situations themselves. Are these creepy clowns taking over America? Whether these clowns are real threats or just people pranking, we won't know. Be careful out there. Number 3. I don't know if many of you remember this, but back in 2016 there was a creepy clown trend where people would dress up as creepy/killer clowns and would hang out in places after dark and stalk people. My story takes place on my college campus during the fall of that year. I lived with my grandparents before leaving for school, and I am extremely close to them. Also, I am very shy and had 0 friends or people I regularly hung out with at school. I wanted to reach out and meet new folks. So, I signed up for salsa dancing club that met every Friday night. I told my grandma over the phone, and she was really happy. I was putting myself out there. She asked if I was going with anybody. This is how the conversation went. No, I told her. I'm just gonna go by myself. Are you sure? She asked. Don't any of your roommates want to go? The idea of talking to my roommates kind of terrified me. I could handle structural gatherings, but personal conversations left more room for my awkwardness to creep in. No, they're not here. I don't want you walking around campus by yourself, especially at night. I thought my grandma was being a little overprotective. Grandma, it's fine. The streets are well lit, and it's only 10 minutes. It's perfectly safe. Well, if you're not going with anybody, call me and let me talk to you on the phone while you walk back. I agreed. That evening was incredibly fun. Learning the basic steps and dancing to upbeat Latin tunes. At around 10:30, I felt ready to head back to my dorm, so I snuck out of the building and headed towards my dorm. Although the paved path I was walking on was well lit by the streetlights, it seemed darker than usual. In addition, the entire campus was deserted. Normally, there were quite a few kids my age wandering around at this time of night, but there was not one single soul this time. I dialed my grandma and made small talk with her as I walked. I took my heels off and carried them in my free hand. Now, the path that I was walking on went past the stretch of sidewalk that was perpendicular to the one I was walking down. Under one of the streetlights, about 10 meters away, I noticed a long figure standing with his back towards me. The figure, hearing me chat on the phone, slowly turned towards me. He was tall and heavyset, with wild red hair, and appeared to be wearing light blue pajamas. His face was obscure. It was like one of those killer clown masks you'd see posted on the news right now. The mask was stark, white, with dark black eye sockets, and a twisted grin. Time seemingly went slower. It went slow and way down. The clown did not move toward me. He simply stood there, staring. I know I had to think fast. I contemplated my options. I could A, scream like a little girl and run. B, approach him and confront him. Or C, pretend he didn't scare me. The entire moment I just couldn't describe, couldn't have lasted more than a second. But in that moment it felt like an eternity. Are you there? I heard my grandma say. Remembering to breathe with the phone still at my ear, I decided to go with plan C. I broke eye contact with the clown. So, anyway, I said loudly, that the clown would hear me. Yeah, I'm on my way, I continued. What's going on? Is everything okay? I heard my grandma ask. Her voice suddenly filled with anxiety. As confidently and nonchalantly as I could, I walked past the sidewalk where the clown was standing, continuing to chat. His head slowly turned as I walked past, watching me until I was out of sight. I ducked into an archway of the nearest building and tried the door, praying that it was unlocked. It was. Once I was inside, I slumped against one of the concrete walls and broke down in tears. I explained to my grandma what just happened. My grandma yelled for my grandpa to dial the campus police on his cell phone so that I could stay on the line with her. I got up, started pacing up and down the empty halls, checking every door, every window to see if the psycho had followed me. Was he a stupid kid doing this on a dare or something? Or was it someone with more evil intentions? Some of the creepy clowns in the news had axes or baseball bats. I had no idea if mine was armed. When my grandpa tried to explain to the officer on the phone what happened, and that I needed help, he told my grandpa, "Look, your granddaughter needs to make the call herself." Apparently the reason I had to talk to them was so that they could be sure the call wasn't just a prank or something, for a stupid reason like that. The point is, they wouldn't take my grandfather's word that I was distressed. I would have to hang up with my grandma and dial the campus police myself, not knowing if I would survive this night. I told my grandma between sobs, "I love you. I love you too," my grandma also saying while she was crying. I dialed the campus police and told them who I was and what had happened. The officer on the phone sent several other officers to find me while I stayed on the phone with him and gave him a description of this clown. As I was talking, I heard the door open. I froze. Was the clown in here? Did he hear me? Did he find a way in? A tidal wave of relief washed over me as several officers came striding down the corridor. They walked with me back to my dorm. As soon as I got inside, I locked the door and the windows and shut the blinds. I called my grandma back to tell her I was safe. After talking for a little bit longer, we said goodnight. Since then, I have made a few friends at school. While I'm in a better place now, I don't go out alone after dark anymore. And as for that creepy clown, let's not meet again. When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was a really nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to campus, so it was kind of ideal. The girl who lived there was 29, and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a bit quiet. But she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell something was a little bit off with her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I look like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, really, so I just shrugged it off with a thanks. I mean, I look nothing like Shia LaBeouf, so it just didn't make any sense to me. When we got back home, she asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me in there to see it. Her walls were covered with posters of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out pictures of him all over the mirror. She owned all his movies. I didn't know what really to make of this. It was kind of creepy. The whole night she had been saying that I look like him, and now it's pretty obvious that she was obsessed with the guy. So now a few weeks have passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together, really. She would come home from work and practically run into her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had a creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I would just hear her giggling through the walls all night. I wondered what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally she would come out and talk to me for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she drinks a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything. She would just stand there in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised and say, "Hello, Beth?" And then there would be a long, awkward pause, and she would just start giving out that creepy, high-pitched giggle she has. It was definitely uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard what sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my room and all the lights were off, but I could see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker. Max Barker. Max Barker. Seeing her stand in the dark, mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kinda looked like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. After that, there was this one night. I was watching The Gladiator. She stumbled out of her room and turned the living room light on, forcing me to stop the movie, which was pretty fucking annoying. She then asked if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy topic, but I just said sure, and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes into her story, she was so riled up. She was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops at this point, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower her volume. Amidst of all of her screaming, one thing she said that really freaked me out was I'll slit his fucking throat. That was a big game changer to me. Suddenly I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening and started doing that fucking giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go to sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in this house with her now. And what's worse is that there was no locks on the bedroom. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act as a little barricade. I somehow figured out how to doze off or something. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping across the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on the light, shouting her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She was so drunk. She had this insane look in her eyes. I jumped up and pushed the door closed and yelled for her to go back to bed. I could hear her walk back into her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep after that. Hell no. But what's worse is the next morning when I woke up, I went into the hallway and my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives was on the floor in front of my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think about was her saying that she was going to slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it and she said that she didn't remember any of this. She didn't remember trying to open my door. She didn't remember even talking about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved out, she contacted me. I was at the movies when she sent the messages, and my phone was off. When I got out and turned my phone on, and to my shock I received 40 plus text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all insane texts, range from everything between, "Hi, how are you?" to, "I fucking hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't had set my dresser in front of my door, if she would have quietly come in there and slit my throat. It freaks me out. I was talking to a seller on Craigslist that was selling a Galaxy S3 phone case. I talked to him for quite a bit and finally came up to the conclusion that I would meet him at his house later that night. For some reason, I had no red flags at this point. So, I decided to go ahead and head that way. When I arrived at his home, it looked very run down, like it was run down as hell. Like, it looked really nasty. Well, just vile. He showed me the case outside of his home, and it went great. But his breath stunk so horribly. I wanted to throw up on the fucking spot. When we did the exchange, the case was $15, no big deal. But then he decided to offer me to come in. He gave me this creepy fucking grin. For some reason, it reminded me a lot of the kids' cartoon from back in the day, if you know what I'm talking about. The movie The Grinch is exactly how it fucking looked. I very nicely told him no, that I had to get going. But then he started being persistent. I started to turn around, and then I just feel somebody grab my arm. He grabbed me and just smiled. I yanked away and ran to my car. He just stood there and stared at me. I had my headlights on and he was just sitting there, grinning. He just stood there. I immediately backed up very quickly and hauled ass out of there, keeping my eye on the rearview mirror, just watching him fade slowly to black. I thought about calling the cops. I just don't know what they would have even been able to do. I just feel so scared. I never used Craigslist again after that. And I have a pretty damn good reason why. A guy made a Craigslist posting saying he was a talent scout and ran an agency. He got the interest of a father, grandfather, and his granddaughter. This guy's specialty was casting families, preferably children, under the disguise that he was looking to produce a film and needed actors. Not too long ago, the grandfather and his granddaughter went to meet with the guy up at the house. They actually drove by 2 hours early to check out the house before going to it. There was a for sale sign outside the house, and it appeared vacant. The family drove by at the agreed time to meet in the morning, and were greeted at the door with a man in a suit. He tried to convince the little girl to come inside many times. The grandfather got a bad feeling and left. Turns out, in an unrelated sting, the police caught this guy for child porn charges. He had 10 counts of child porn, and his house was raided. The father and grandfather, around the same time, reported this incident to the police. When the police found this guy, he had a bag with him In it was a knife, zip ties, sex toys, and even a plastic sheet. He was going to pretty much kill the grandfather, then rape and murder the child. His plan was to get this all on film. Sick fuck. The camera was set up and ready to go. Luckily, the father and grandfather had a gut feeling of something, that something was off, and reported the incident. This guy happened to be a kid I pretty much grew up with knowing for about 15 years. He was even my brother's roommate for a while. He was always very creepy, and I just couldn't pinpoint why exactly. I felt my stomach drop reading this news. This guy has been inside my home, went to parties, even my birthday party. I have had multiple conversations with him. Luckily, he won't be getting out of jail anytime soon. And I'm glad. People, just watch out using Craigslist. There are a lot of lunatics on there. And I would rather you not be one of the victims to one of them. I always thought that these Ouija boards were just kind of a hoax, and just to play around and scare your friends. However, years ago, this changed when I did it once with some random people at a get-together. We were talking to all these sorts of different spirits, if you would say, and I wasn't taking any of it seriously. Then I thought of a way to put it to the test. I'm Kuwait American and was born in Kuwait, so I know Arabic, and I knew of a friend of my brother's that had passed away recently. So I asked to speak to him. Now only one person knew me at the get-together, and even they didn't know that much about me. I was definitely the only one that could speak Arabic. I was in Oklahoma at the time, so I asked it in Arabic how he died. The board spelled out car crash. I was a bit shocked, but I still didn't buy it completely. So I asked more detailed questions. I asked in Arabic how old he was when he died. It pointed to a 1 and then a 3. That's when I really started to freak out. No one would ever have known of these details, let alone understood what I was asking. They kind of just looked at me weird while I was speaking Arabic. I asked for more details on the crash. He had flown out of the sunroof, and after that I stopped. I haven't touched a Ouija board since. My ex-girlfriend and her friends used one of these Ouija boards when they were around 16 years old, this being 2 years after her dad died. She had closed herself off, so it was nice seeing that she was trying to make friends again. I was on the phone with her while her friends and her were using it in the background. They had already contacted a few entities, allegedly, so she was talking and telling me about it, and I could hear in the background her friends laughing in the background. Then suddenly, the laughter stopped. One of the girls said to my ex, "Is your dad named James?" She hadn't told any of these girls about her dad yet, so it was a weird question, but she told them yes, her dad's name was James. Then they had said a few things, and she told me she'd call me right back. From what she told me after, the girls had contacted a man named James. They had asked who he was, and when he died. He replied, "Dad, 2 years ago." They asked why he was there. He said his daughter. They asked what my ex's name was, and it spelled out my ex's name. That's when they had stopped laughing. After she hung up, she started asking questions, but not touching the board in any way, to discern if it was them just fooling around with her. She asked him what was the nickname her dad used to call her when she was little. He said Sweet Pea. My ex had bursted into tears. She had immediately stopped using it because it had scared her so much. It wasn't the fact that it possibly was her dad, but there was no way that any of them actually knew anything about her dad. She hasn't touched one since. When I was a kid, one of my friends had a similar game called Psychic Circle. If I remembered correctly, her bedroom was in the attic. We had been talking about a friend that I had that lived down the street from me earlier in the evening, and I was wondering what had happened to him. When I asked the board of the name we were talking to, it was his name, Jeremy. It went to non-response for a little bit, and then started spelling out J-E-N. We all freaked out because two of us were named Jennifer. Then it spelled out my full name. Not once, but twice. And then it spelled out something else that haunts me to this day. Y-O-U-A-R-E-D-E-A-D. You are dead. I yelled and we jumped back from it. The indicator started spinning around wildly in the circle on the board. Then it went flying across the floor, so hard that it went into the stairs. Just then, there was a knock on the door. It was her mom or something. I nearly passed the fuck out thinking it was actually somebody. And believe me, when I said I had no sleep that evening. That's been over a decade ago, and I'm obviously still alive. But I am really still freaking out now, because while I was typing this, I started to hear what sounded like a woman sobbing on the front porch. I didn't open the door, and I just left it alone. This one time, at band camp, a girl brought an authentic Ouija board made out of maple straight from Salem. Ironically, she was very Catholic, but loved her board, and it was very interesting for a few nights in the dorm with it. I think the second night we were playing with it, and it was going slow, not very much movement at all, so we were just like, meh. I had my hand off of the piece, because I still wasn't so sure about doing this thing. Suddenly, it was like cold fingers had grabbed my shoulder, ever so slightly. And this terrifying feeling in the back of my mind just came to the surface. I looked to the board, and then to the piece, and it started moving in a demonic pattern. I think figure eights this time. I looked at the girl and said, I have a bad feeling about this thing. I don't want to play. In the time of her realizing what was happening, she stopped the movement and bid the spirit goodbye. In that moment, the icy grip loosened, and all was well. Everyone was like, whoa, when the girl explained what the figure eight meant, that something was trying to get out of the board. This is common lore that goes with the Ouija usage, by the way. At a later time, we were playing in somebody else's room. When we asked for the name of whoever was talking, it responded, Zelda AMN. Something came through. We got talking to her, and we found that she was an old widow whose husband had died in the war. She died at age 80. I remembered the name, and a few years later on a trip to Salem, where the board was made, we went past some old houses with historical plaques that said the original owners and the year they were built. Well, on one of those houses was the name Z.M. Nazi. I flipped my shit, got all excited, etc. That was really cool, and I won't forget that coincidence. And another coincidence I didn't write was that in the same band camp we were playing with the Ouija board at the camp's concert when all the kids got kicked out of the auditorium. There was a bunch of kids from another state. Many of us didn't know each other, and no one I knew was watching us. We got to talking to someone, and I asked if they knew anyone there. They responded with yes. Then it gave us a full name of a boy that was there but not playing. It gave his name, Charles or something like that, and that it was his godfather. The boy started crying. It just got really weird after that. We decided to end it after that and didn't pick it up again. Well, I never thought that I would be posting one of these here. My mother and father moved into an apartment in Clarksville, Tennessee, about a year after I was born, and my mother was really big into spirit world and used a Ouija board frequently, honestly. A few months after living in that apartment, she had an experience with it and locked the board into a closet and didn't even look at it or touch it ever again. She then started having these experiences with a spirit that would talk to her in her dreams. The spirit's main motivation was to take me, about 18 months old, for himself. My mom says he looked like he was well dressed and a gentleman from around the 1800s with a top hat. Included, he was really long and not very proportional. Then several strange things happened to me, with a lot of near-death experiences. On my part, my head getting stuck in a part of the crib I couldn't reach and slowly suffocating, my crib becoming unlocked and me almost rolling out. My mom woke from one of these dreams of the man telling her he was going to be taking me each time, and then she would run into my room to check on me and ended up saving me. In these dreams, the man would be in the rocking chair in my room holding me and rocking me with a loving look on his face. But when she would enter, his face would be a darker appearance and all of that. The strangest thing was when my mother would rush into my room, the rocking chair would be moving and suddenly stop when she would slam the door open. We eventually moved out of the apartment and to Germany because that's where my father's job was. We returned to Clarksville a few years later, and I found a Ouija board and started to play around with it when my mother walked in the room saying that she had a bad feeling and told me to quit playing with it, and explained all of this to me. She told me all about the experiences and how our old apartment had a tree that had been used for hangings in the early days of Tennessee. My whole life, I've had these strange feelings from time to time, like someone is around me, but I try to ignore these as best as I can for fear that he is still trying to take me. I do know I don't particularly care for these Ouija boards anymore, and the one my mother had locked in the closet to this day. I just get a feeling of unease around them, like someone really wants to take me. I've in fact only ever used one once with my group of friends from high school near the apartments I used to live in as a child. The only thing that was spelled out before we quit was, "Hello, miss me, my child." Needless to say, I freaked out. We shut it and never touched it again. I understand why my mom is so afraid of these things now. Number 1. I was home alone for a week as my family had gone on a vacation while I had to stay at home and work. It was around 2 a.m. and I'd stayed up to watch some scary movies in the dark in my basement. I was intent on really scaring myself and seeing how far into terror I could really go, while still knowing I was safe and in my own home. It was then that I heard pounding footsteps on the first floor. This was common, annoying. It was the same occurrence when my family was always home. Every time they would pass through the front hallway, pass through the basement door, I always heard their footsteps. But this time, knowing that they were on vacation, fear immediately shot through my heart when I heard the sound. My reflex was to turn off the TV immediately. The basement door was up a flight of stairs and around a corner, so whoever it was would not have seen any lights. I heard the basement door handle click and turn as I sat in absolute darkness. I moved slowly and absolutely silently and crawled behind our large television. As I passed inch by inch, I noted with panic that its black screen was still dimly glowing. I heard footsteps coming down the carpeted but creaky steps. I froze in my hiding place, listening. For many long minutes, I heard nothing. Had the intruder seen the television afterglow? Or had it faded in enough time? Were they standing in the pitch dark, listening for me? I seemed to lie there in total silence for a very long time. My panic began to fade, and I began to think more clearly. Had I really heard an intruder? Could someone possibly be standing there in the silence for so long without making any noise? The basement was so exceedingly quiet that the silence itself began to hurt my ears. Could the unknown person really avoid any noise from shuffling or breathing or anything else? If there was an intruder, they were still in the basement, because the creaky stairs were incredibly loud, and they wouldn't know to mask their footsteps on the first floor so that they couldn't be heard down here. I began counting in my head, trying to pass the time. As drool fell down my mouth onto the carpet, I didn't risk the sound of swallowing. I reached 60 seconds once, twice, 30 times, 60 times. By now the fear had faded, and I was more confused than anything. I estimated that I'd been crouched there in absolute black for almost 2 hours now, and I still heard nothing. If there was an intruder, none of this made any sense. But finally, I decided to make a fucking move. If I did nothing, eventually the sun would just come up and shine in through the small basement window. And worse, I began to smell something horrible. Slowly, ever so slowly, I began inching my way towards the stairs by the way of the wall. If someone was standing in the dark, I should be able to go around them and make a break for the stairs. Meanwhile, the horrible odor grew stronger. Had something died down here in the night or something? No living person smells like that. Terrible images of some sort of corpse monster listening for me in the dark interrupted all of my thoughts, and I moved as fast as I could without making a sound. Just as I finally approached the stairs, there was an enormous clatter as if someone was falling or collapsing on the floor. It was at that moment that I leaped forward, crashing up the stairs, running out through the open basement door and my wide open front door. Now certain someone was in the house, I called the police from my cell phone and watched my house from afar. The police came and checked the inside of my house and grimly came back out to question me. They'd found a body in my house. My elderly neighbor, who seemed to have died from a heart attack. The belief was that I must have left my front door unlocked, and he must have wandered in looking for help. At first I felt horrible, thinking that I sat there in the dark while this old man died a few feet away from me. Then it occurred to me, what the hell was the loud noise from things falling that last prompted me to bolt up these stairs and out of my house? I asked the police and they confirmed. The back door to my house had been left opened as well, near a single barefoot print in the mud. Somehow, for some reason, I'll never know, if there was someone else in my basement with us, silent, waiting, and listening in the dark over the fresh corpse of an old man, I'll never know. Number 2. 2 years ago, I moved to uptown Dallas to a 3-story brownstone. It was really close to the freeway and downtown, but the entrance to my garage and my place were both gated, so I felt quite safe. The first level was a small study, the garage, and the entryway. The second floor was a dining area, kitchen, and living room, and the upstairs was the master bedroom and bathroom. I'm a single woman, and it was just me and my 2 little dogs. The night after I moved in, I was on my computer late at night when someone started ringing my doorbell. Not just one ring, but repetitive rings. I didn't know a soul in the city yet, so I didn't answer the door. It stopped, and I didn't think anything of it. The houses all looked alike, so someone probably just had the wrong place. About 10 minutes later, the same thing happened, followed by pounding on my door. I stood up at the top of the stairs, watching and making sure whoever was there left, and not sure what to do at that point. The bell and pounding stopped, so I assumed they left, but my 2 dogs were still standing at the door, looking up at the handle and wagging their tails. They knew someone was still there. The door was deadlocked, thank God, because what happened next still gives me chills. I saw the door handle turn slowly. I called 911, and within a few minutes the cops showed up. Whoever was at my door was gone by then, but my welcome mat was all wet. No idea how the liquid got there. The police did not seem concerned, and said someone was probably drunk and just went to the wrong house. They left, and I locked up and went to bed. I forgot about the incident more or less until a couple of months later. There was a park across the street, so I take my dogs there a few times a day. Well, one afternoon, I took my dog on a long walk, locking my door behind me. When I got back 30 or 45 minutes later, something seemed off. There was a strong smell of men cologne in my entryway. I thought it was weird, but assumed it was my neighbor's cologne wafting through the wall. A single guy that lived next door to me, and a guy and girl that were on the other side. I went upstairs and was cleaning up. Then I noticed something really weird. There was a dollar bill, folded lengthwise, laying on top of my open purse. I'd never carry cash, and on rare occasion I do. I certainly don't fold them lengthwise. I did not know what to think of this. It made no sense. I assumed somehow I must have had like $1 and ended up putting it like that. Well, a few weeks later, I woke up early in the afternoon on a Saturday after a late night out. I went downstairs to make some tea, and when I was getting my sugar substitute, I found another dollar bill folded lengthwise, just sitting in the cabinet. At this point, I get the chills. I could maybe justify the first one, but definitely not the second. I had been in and out that cabinet the day before, and that dollar had not been there. I called the management office and asked if maintenance had been in there. They said no, that no one had been in my place since I had moved in and had them hook up my washer. I told them I thought someone had been in my house. They changed my locks, which made me feel better. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked now, with a big old can of bear spray by my bed. I truly did not know what to think. Nothing had been stolen from my house, ever. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't a big deal. I had new locks. I was overreacting, but I never felt safe in my place again. I didn't have any more dollar bill incidents until my lease ended after 15 months, and I was packing up. I started finding random dollars behind a photo of my family on the wall. A dollar bill folded lengthwise. In my bathroom, another one under the sink, and another random one on the floor that must have fallen from a box or something when the movers were moving it. With every dollar, I felt so sick. I'm not sure if it was related to the first night when someone tried to get in, but someone was in there with the dogs, who were everything to me, in my house, pawing through my things to hide these random dollars for God knows what reason. The people I've told, they just don't believe me or make jokes to me about all of this. So I don't really tell anyone, but I know someone had been in there more than once. Why and how and what the dollars were for, I will never know. Update. Oddly enough, it happened to me again. 2 years later, just 2 weeks ago, in my new apartment and new state. Only this time, whoever came in opened all of my blinds and left a large cardboard tube across the bedroom doorway. Same story. Maintenance swears no one came in, and there was no reason for any of them to be in there, or to have put the cardboard tube like that. The maintenance manager changed my locks and suggested I buy a gun. I'm starting to feel insane. I wonder if this kind of thing is common and people just don't notice. I'm sometimes too nice to my friends. I tend to do favors for my friends even if it seems pretty ridiculous, as long as it's not like terribly out of my way or something. Most of the time it's usually like a text or something saying, "Help, I'm drunk, I need a ride." Well, one night at like 1:30 a.m., I get a call. A very, very drunk friend of mine, Claire, is begging me to come pick her up and give her a ride home soon. The bar is closing soon, and she's too drunk to drive. The bar she is at isn't too far from my house. It's about 10 to 15 minute drive. But the issue is, she lives like 35 to 45 minutes on the other side of the town. Claire has been extremely nice to me in the past, and I did owe her a few solids. So at about 10 to 2, I grab my keys, my conceal and carry, and leave my house. I get to the bar about 2:05, and she's sitting outside on a bench by the doorman. I pull into the parking lot, which was pretty much empty since the bar is closed, and I assumed that the cars remaining were just the workers who hadn't left yet. I get out of the car and start walking to Claire, who is kinda slumped over. I was hoping she wasn't passed out drunk, and when I got there, I got her, and the doorman asked me if I was her ride. I told him yes, showed him my ID for the proof, and what he said next was some concern. Just a side note, I'm gonna leave out where I interjected, and just write what he said. Hey, I was supposed to leave when we closed, but I have a strong feeling your friend was roofied. She's been on the porch drinking all night, and some guy kept hovering over her. I assumed it was her boyfriend, or whatever, but she never turned to talk to the guy. She was either drinking and chatting with other girls around her, or something. Well, anyways, she chugged her last drink, came up to me and told me that you would be coming to pick her up. She asked me if I could sit with her for a little bit, or let her sit by me, whichever was easiest. She told me she felt a little dizzy and sick. I told her, sure, hoping that she just drank too much and she passed out right after that. After that, I couldn't see the guy anymore, but I didn't want to take my chances and leave her alone. So, visibly concerned, I thanked the guy profusely, and he even helped me carry Claire to my car. Midway to carrying, she's kind of coming to, like someone just waking her up after surgery. That really groggy, not knowing where they are, talking nonsense kind of talking. I don't remember exactly what she was talking about, but I'm sure if I wasn't there, on high alert, her possibility of being drugged, it would have been some funny shit. So we get her buckled in, and I think the guy, once again, he just says he hopes that she gets home safe. So now, hoping my friend is only stupid drunk and not drugged, I start driving to her house. The whole time I'm trying to keep an eye on her, and an eye on the road. She's now snoring asleep, which puts me to ease a little bit. But about halfway to her house, my fuel light comes on. Cruising the fuel economy of a sports car, I'm gonna have to pull over to the next gas station. It's one of those small gas stations that doesn't have a 24-hour store. So I'm on an extra high alert at this point and start pumping gas. The gas station is about a block from the freeway and right at the corner of an intersection. The street is pretty dark, with lonely lampposts shining very pitiful lights at large intervals. I get a really dead feeling, like this place was just abandoned. To give an idea of positioning, because this is pretty fucking important, the gas station is at the corner of the intersection. The storefront would be facing south, and we were right in front of it, where the pumps were. The east would be where there are like air pumps for tires and parking spaces, and the north would be diesel fuel pumps, right behind the store, accessible from the street behind the gas station. I drive a Corvette, so the filler is on the rear end of the car, and I'm leaning against it, in the rear looking. To my left, I hear a weird metallic scraping around, so I turn to see this guy that's like 15 to 20 feet from me, coming around the corner dragging a long metal pipe on the ground. I immediately sense that this is possibly a dangerous situation now. The guy looks possessed, and he looks right at me, rather like he's trying to look into my car. I'm on the defensive, but hope I can get him to just leave, so I call out, "Hey, everything all right?" Without looking at me, he answers back, "You took my girlfriend from me. I'm here to take her back." Now he turns to look at me, and he's got blood in his eyes. Before he begins to take a step, though, I start yelling, hoping that it'll just make him back off. Now, I'm a little over 6 feet tall and not really skinny, but not exactly bulky either. But I have a very deep voice. Back the fuck off, turn around and leave, and no one gets hurt. He takes a step towards me, clearly unimpressed. So almost automatically, I pull the handgun out from my side and draw a bead on him. Back the fuck off, you don't have to die. I start yelling louder, Pretty sure my voice cracked because A, I'm scared shitless. No amount of self-defense classes in time at the range prepares you for any emotional kind of situation like this. B, even though I carry, I'm really against violence, and killing someone is not something I want to do. C, did I mention I'm fucking scared? Anyway, in a panic, the fucker throws a pipe at me. It wheezes by my fucking head, thankfully not towards my car, but to my right, and I dive behind the car for cover. I have no idea if this guy has a gun himself or what, but I was not gonna be put in that situation and have to take cover between me and him. And by this time, I kneel and aim over to the rear of the car. He's booked it, and I hear a car door slam and tires screech, and he launches off the curve on the east side of the lot and is tearing down the road, swaying all over the place. Now in my own panic, I hurried up. I pull the pump out of the car, screw on the cap, and tear out of there myself. Claire, however, is still passed out in the car, and now I'm afraid because I'm convinced she's been drugged and we were followed by that guy. Me being more concerned about her earlier and keeping on the road, I must not have noticed being followed. The whole way back to her house, I'm stressed as fuck and worrying about every single car that's behind me. I'm also driving very aggressively, speeding like a jackass, I could say. And when I get to Claire's neighborhood, I circle a separate block that's not hers 4 times to make sure no one followed me. When I was satisfied thinking I wasn't being followed anymore, I pulled into her house and tried to shake her awake. She's doing that groggy, waking up stuff from before, again, but now she's able to get up and I'm able to walk her in. Thankfully, I was worried about having to call an ambulance if she didn't wake up, and I get her keys from her. I managed to walk her inside, and at this point she's coming around, asking me what's going on, where she is, etc. I tell her she's at home, and to get her to lie down. She completely looks lost, and her eyes start welling up. She's clinging my arm and starts sobbing. She's still very out of it, but I'm guessing she realizes something bad was going on, or attempted on her. I was able to get her to lie down and get her to sleep. I write a note for her, pretty much saying, "Hey, I'll be in the next room. We're going to go to the hospital in the morning and get you checked out." Fast forward to the next morning, she's sick as a dog, and after she expelled some demons from her stomach, if you know what I mean. So I drove her to the hospital where we got her tested and treated. I still shudder to think what might have happened had I not had my CCW with me. Conceal and carry for everyone. I do know martial arts, but that's not something I want to take against a crazy person with a pipe. I mean, it's pretty fucking obvious. Claire still doesn't remember much from that night except calling me and wanting to sit next to the doorman. My advice for you guys, either be with your friends you trust when you go out, or at least be vigilant if you're by yourself. The night could have ended badly in 1,000 different ways, but thankfully, even luckily, everyone made it out safe. I was a designated driver for the evening, and in return I got free drinks. I had to wear a wristband which was mostly covered by my jacket. All night I was drinking plenty of Red Bull. I got to chatting with the group of guys. I knew 2 of them from my job at the time, and they were regular customers. And a song came on that I liked, so I left my drink with one of my friends. I was driving and proceeding to dance. I came back and downed the rest of my drink in a few gulps and went outside for some air with another one of my friends who I had driven with. I was outside for about 5 minutes when I started to get dizzy and lightheaded. I grabbed my friend's arm to stop from falling. This knocked the drink out of her hand. She gave me a once-over and I couldn't even string her sentences together, and I remember having a hard time trying to talk. She yelled at me and accused me of drinking before storming back inside and leaving me alone. I remember snippets of trying to find the door to outside the club to grab a cab. I was tripped over and spat on by a group of guys when the bouncer came over and noticed me. He noticed my band and took me outside. He gave me some water and put me at the front of the line for a cab to arrive. I blacked out, then I remember being dragged up the stairs by my boyfriend at the time. Bits of him yelling at me, throwing up and shaking, then slept till 4 p.m. the next day. When I came to, I had a barrage of text messages asking if I was okay, as one of my friends had gone with me, had been spiked, and they couldn't find me. So they were freaking out. And then my boyfriend and an irate yelling at me, accusing me of drinking, when I promised I wouldn't due to the money situation. He didn't talk to me for 3 days until my friend told him that she had been spiked as well. I haven't been to that club since. I should have reported it, but I didn't know if they could do anything.
Let me give some background before I tell the story. At the time, I was a high school senior, and where I lived, you could choose to go during the day or night. Anyway, I chose night school because I was a teenager and I hated waking up early. I went to work during the day, but I worked at a local law firm and could go and leave whenever I pleased. I should also add that my family has done some remodeling to this house. Tore down the walls, added new ones, gutted the whole kitchen and bathroom, and then they rebuilt them again. Anyway, I had a terrible headache that day, so I didn't go to work in the morning. I was laying in bed, sleeping on my back with a pillow over my face because it was too bright in my room. I hear my door open, and it sort of wakes me up. I continue laying there. I'm still half asleep, and I don't care enough to even move the pillow off of my face, when I feel pressure on my stomach, like someone poking me with 2 or 3 fingers, which makes me twitch pretty hard. And it's like whatever poked me realized something's living and was under the covers and needed to get out, so I hear footsteps. I live in an old house, and we have creaky hardwood floors. So if this was a human, I would hear creaking from the weight on the hardwood floors. But these steps didn't creak or sound like footsteps. It sounded like a pitter-patter. The noise clearly goes out of my room, and my door slams shut. So now I'm fully awake, and I think my mom is home for lunch, and she's clearly the one that came in my room and poked me. Actually, I was kind of pissed that she slammed my door when she knew I had a headache. I go check my phone and realize it's only 10 a.m. My mom's lunch isn't till 12, though. So I call my mom and ask her if she was in the house, and she's like, "What the fuck? No, I'm still at work, why?" I tell her what just happened, and she tells me to walk around the house with our big-ass dog named Detroit. He was a guard dog, and he was mean as hell, and he is big. My stepdad poured concrete and would take my dog to work with him, but he had to keep him chained up to his truck because everyone was scared of him. So I know if this was a person Detroit didn't know. Basically, he would have already attacked them. So back to the story. I apparently grew the balls in that time and walked around the house with Bubba. He didn't seem freaked out. No one was in there. So I called back and said I didn't see anything. But as I'm sitting there in realization of what happened, and the weirdest footsteps start to sink in, it was all kinds of weird vibes. So I'm sitting in the room, starting to panic. Out of nowhere, my door slowly opens. Basically, I nope and get the heck out of there through a different door that goes outside. Almost immediately once I get outside, I feel better and start to breathe again. I call my mom back and tell her what happened, and she comes home to look through the house with me. She gets there, and we're standing in the living room when the door handle on one of the doors going to the closet starts to jiggle very violently. Obviously, we leave, I go to my mom's work with her in my pajamas because I'm not staying in that fucking house. After she gets off work, we tell my stepdad, and he thinks I was dreaming for the poking bit, and the rest was just apparently the wind. But now he believes me, because they've had other things happen, like pans flying across the kitchen, stuff randomly falling from the walls. They're new and evil, cat freaking out randomly for no reason, just acting scared. That's the only time that I was ever really scared in this house. My parents still live there, and I moved out with my boyfriend after I graduated. But I go there all the time, and still haven't gotten the weird vibes that I used to. They tell me all the time about all these other things that have been happening. I'm so glad I'm out of there. There was a 13-year-old girl. Her parents were out for dinner. Susie, the girl, was getting really bored at home by herself. So she goes to the computer and enters a chat room. She starts talking to her friends when a girl enters the chat. A new girl, whose name is red on the computer screen, claimed it to be one of her friends of a girl that had signed out. They agreed to let her talk to them. But soon, red on started making very rude comments about everyone except Susie. In fact, red on was flattering Susie. Susie felt like she was better than all the other girls, so she wanted to know where this girl lived. She told red on her email and told her, "I definitely want to meet you." Susie received an email 1 minute later. Susie saw it was titled, "Where I Live." She opens up the email. Shock filled Susie's body. The email said, "Behind the couch." When the parents get back, they find Susie stabbed to death in a chair and read what is on the computer screen. They walk towards the couch and look behind it. There was a mini laptop with the same email and chat room. And next to the computer was a bloody knife. After finding this, they immediately called the police. When the police arrived, they couldn't really do anything with the laptop. They didn't know whose it was. There was no traces of fingerprints. The killer was never found. A little background. I'm a female, and some of the houses nearby me are also known as meth labs, so you can kind of tell what kind of place I'm in. I live in a slightly rural spot. So, one night, after about midnight, I hear banging on my door. I thought it was my boyfriend attempting to get like a booty call or something. When I got to the door, I could see through my small little glass window, but instead of my boyfriend, I saw the side of an unfamiliar bearded face. He didn't see me, and I backed away from the door quickly. My house was in a cellular dead zone, so I knew my chances to use my cell were basically useless, and next to nothing. I grabbed my landline next to my bed to call 911, but the line was dead. It was just like the horror movies, where the killer cuts the phone line. Meanwhile, the guy was still pounding away and slurring, "Let me in." I grabbed the biggest chef knife I own, which is pretty fucking big, and locked myself in the bathroom. I stood on the edge of the tub, behind the shower curtain, figuring I might have a chance if I can jump on him from above or stab him in between the neck or shoulder area when he tried to bust the door down. I was terrified, but also pleased with my plan, and I waited. He started working his way around the outsides of the house. I could hear him sliding his hands along the sides and banging his fists against the walls. For the split second, I realized, in my surprising badass plan, that my sabotaged phone hadn't been charged in days. Maybe one of the other handsets still worked. I have never felt more fear in the moment I climbed down
from the hiding spot, unlocked the bathroom door, and went to search for the second handset. All while a madman is moving around outside of my house, violently knocking on every single door and window I have. I found a phone and it worked. I dialed 911, but the closest officer was 15 minutes away. I was told to stay on the line, lock myself back in the bathroom again, and that was the longest 15 minutes of my life. When the police arrived, they had me identify this cuffed, scruffy, drunk off of his ass, dirty hippie guy. Apparently there had been a house party down the road, and he got disoriented and thought that my house was his friend's house. He was trying to get back inside for the party, is what he told the cops, for 20 minutes of pure terror. I call bullshit. I don't care if he was drunk or not. So let this be a lesson for everybody. Keep your fucking phones charged.
Okay, I must say a lot of my bad experiences happened when I was about 15 to 16 years old, as that was the same age my parents finally allowed me to go out with my friends to the mall or to go and eat alone. Any day I would go out or ride the bus, there was always guys hollering at me and catcalling me. That it became so regular to me, and I just ignored them or I just smiled. How sad, right? I've been catcalled since I was 11 by men who were over probably 30. For those who are from smaller towns and aren't familiar with the Los Angeles metro, there is plenty of transits, places where the bus stops last stop and reroutes to where it came from. I usually ended up using these quite frequently. So, I was at the transit waiting for my bus to go back home. Number 35, we will say. The 35 bus was coming to the transit, dropped off a couple of people, including 2 men, that followed me, then proceeded to go inside the lot. So, all I had to do now was wait for the bus to come back and take me home. I had on a t-shirt contained with the words of an artist. One of the guys approached me and commented on my shirt saying he liked the artist and if I had listened to their new album. This wasn't weird to me, and I have never been super iffy about people talking to me. So I talked to him about the artist, and then by the time we were done, the 35 bus came. I grabbed my bag and got up. This is where he began. He then said to me, "Oh, you're leaving? You mind if I get your number?" Then I hit him with the only line I ever know. "I'm sorry, I have a boyfriend," even though I didn't. He responded with, "I just want to be friends. That's it." And I said, "Sorry," and got on the bus. As I sat in the bus, I realized the 2 men got on a little after, and then they sat in the back. Now let me remind you, these men just came from the same place this bus is going to. Why would they go back? It makes no sense. That's when I knew something was not right. I was beginning to get very scared. So I started texting my friends paranoid, letting her know how I felt, that they were following me or something. I could see from the corner of my eye one of them is whispering to each other and then looking at me. Every stop I would pray that they would get off, but they wouldn't. My mind was set on getting off that bus, even if we passed my stop, without them getting off first. We were about 3 stops away from my house when I saw them get up, and I acted as if I didn't notice. I had my headphones in, but wasn't listening to my music, basically to have an excuse to ignore them, but still to be able to act like I didn't hear them. But then the same guy came over to where I was sitting and said, Hey, I'm fucking talking to you." And I ignored it. What he did next scared the living piss out of me, too. He snatched my earbud out and said in my ear, "Hello." And as he did that, he caressed my face in the scariest way. I instantly get goosebumps just thinking about it. And I was like, "What the hell? Don't touch me." He then looked at me, smiled, and laughed, and said, "We just wanted to be friends, sweetie." And laughed at me again, as if my fear caused him some sort of pleasure. They got off, and I literally ran home paranoid when I got off. I immediately kicked open the door
ran to my mom and told her everything. Thankfully, I never saw them again. When I was about 7 years old, I was at my friend's birthday party. We went to a local cinema with about 6 other kids, my friend and her mother. I had to go to the bathroom during the movie, and I told her mom, assuming she'd come with me, because even I knew going to places alone as a child was pretty dangerous. She didn't go with me. I went out to the bathroom alone, and I must mention that this is a small local cinema, which was really old and most of the time empty. Not like regular theaters that nowadays always have people busting in and out of each theater. Anyway, on the way to the bathroom, I saw some guy leaning against the sweets and the popcorn counter, seemingly with nothing to do. I thought maybe he was just waiting for his kids to come out of the bathroom or something. At this point, the bathroom was one small room that was separated into 2 different stalls for men and 2 stalls for women. The guy came in about a minute after me. I could see his shadow under the door of the stall that I was in. He was walking back and forth outside it. He shouldn't have been over on the women's side, so this was kind of odd. And no one else was in the bathroom with us, so I started panicking. I stayed in there for a couple of minutes because I was just too scared to go out. He was right outside. But then he suddenly left, so I decided to go back outside. And when I walked out of the bathroom, he was standing there, blocking the doorway. Standing with his arms and legs spread like he was about to just grab and scoop me or something. My heart started racing. He was more than twice my size. I was terrified. I thought fast enough to jump through the gap between his legs. I skid on the floor, burned my knees, but I got up and ran fast as I could and ran back to the screen the party was at. The only thing I wish is that it ended there. That night at home, I remember hiding this baby doll I had because I thought the guy was going to come for me and wanted to protect her. My mom noticed me acting weird and asked if there was anything wrong. I blurted out, "This man tried to grab me when I was at the cinema." She kind of brushed it off, like she didn't even think I was telling the truth. But I think she was just trying to act like nothing was wrong for my sake. Though I saw her eyes, she was worried. Later I heard her talking to my dad, and she had asked me what the guy looked like. She asked, did he have a black mustache? He did. Did he have messy hair? He did. But how did she know these things? Turns out he was outside of my fucking house earlier that day, replacing the window, and must have heard my mom talking to me about the party. I don't know what he was planning on doing. If he was going to grab me, kidnap me, something. I'm just glad he didn't. Never saw him after that. My mom contacted the police, and there was nothing that they could do. That's the worst part. Yesterday, while I was walking around alone in a local superstore on my way home from work, I spotted this group of 3 younger men. I'm typically the type that keeps my head down and just keeps walking on. But they were acting loud and carrying on in the store. It's hard not to stare for a few seconds because they were those abrupt type. Anyway, I moved on and went to the automotive section, and they were there. Grabbed a few cans of pet food, and as I rounded the corner, there they were again. I thought, no big deal. They're just happened to be in the same place, and carried on with my shopping, as these things happened all the time. As I stopped in the pharmacy area, they were there again. I made eye contact and smiled at one of them, as I wasn't uncomfortable at this time, but he didn't smile back and gave me a very cold stare. It was strange, but I was thinking, well, maybe this person has possibly had a bad day or something. So I shrugged it off and prepared myself for the potential hell that these checkout lines usually are and can be at some times. I looked up while I was waiting to pay and noticed that the men were there, waiting at the end of the scanning aisle on the benches.
Again, I thought, it's not a big deal, and grabbed my bag of goodies and was on my way out. I didn't see anyone as I was walking out the store, but I remember thinking it was strange how I seemed to keep running into these same people inside a huge superstore like this. This is when the story takes a downturn. I typically park on the side of the building. There are more parking spaces than in the front, and it's easier to get in and get out. So as I exit, I recognize the same group of 3 men who I had seen around the store. Keys in my hand, I walk towards my car about 30 feet away. When I'm about 5 feet from my car, I hear loud steps coming up behind me. At this point, I'm thinking, maybe they're going to the car next to me. Unfortunately, that was not the case. I get in and lock the doors out of habit, just as the 3 men surrounded my vehicle, asking me, "Where are you going, sweetheart? We just want to talk." One is trying to open my passenger side door. The other is standing next to my back driver's door and behind the car. At this point, my heart is racing, and without giving it a second thought, I put my car in reverse and sped out of the parking lot space like a bat out of hell. And I was putting my car in reverse to drive. They had one more opportunity to say something to me. "We're here all the time. See you soon, sweetheart." Luckily, I was able to get out of the parking space and get home quickly. I pulled into the house, ran inside, locked all the doors, turned off all the lights, and closed all the blinds to make sure, just in case if anybody tried to follow me home. I didn't see anybody. It's needless to say that I stayed up all night just making sure that nobody had. And I will say, it was a very long time till I went back to that store, just in case they were sitting there waiting. I don't even want to know what they were planning on doing to me, but I can tell you right now, it wasn't good. I don't drink as a general rule, but once a month or so, I would go out with my friends and just binge. My friends and I had a great night in the bar in the city, and then they left. I was chatting up with this cute guy, so I decided to stay. I went back to his place. Very unsatisfying for anyone interested. I'm ready to head home, so I call an Uber to pick me up. I don't know where I am. I know the city I'm in, but I'm not sure on the exact location. I order the Uber, but it's taking forever. Requesting. So I cancel it and try again. Pretty soon a car pulls up. I drunkenly mumble something like, "This the Uber?" And I hop in. Big mistake. Ubers apparently are supposed to have some kind of marking on the vehicle. The guy pulls away and starts driving. We're chatting, just talking, and I'm fumbling for a cigarette. And the next thing I notice is we're headed on the highway, but in the opposite direction of where I thought I needed to drive. And we're going like a solid 90 miles per hour. Then I get a call from my Uber driver. He's there and I'm not. Because I'm not in the right fucking car. And I'm in this car with this fucking nutcase. I start texting my friend frantically, counting off mile markers for her. Then I realize that's going to do jack shit, because she's probably drunk too. So I call 911, but I realize this guy is crazy. He's refusing to let me out of the car, so I've got to do it on the sly. It's been about 40 minutes now. I'm terrified. I don't know where I am. I don't know who this is. We're driving about over 100 miles per hour at this point, weaving in and out of traffic. This guy is trying to get me to hang up the phone. Yo, get off the phone. The fuck are you calling? Better not be snitching. And also smoking pot. So I don't want to do anything that may provoke a violent reaction from him. I start chatting to the 911 dispatcher as if it was my friend, praying that they would catch on. "Hey girl, it's me." "Yeah, I'm with someone right now. We're driving past highway exit." "No, sweetie, it's not my Uber. I thought it was, but it's not. It's a shame you can't come and meet up with us and bring friends." Thanks, sweet baby Jesus. The operator actually caught on. He gets me to stay on the phone while he sends cops and develop a code. If I see cops, I'm supposed to casually put my hand out the window.
which looks semi-normal because I'm smoking a cigarette. We pull into some random housing complex, and he busts out some powder in the forms of 2 lines. I now have confirmation that he has drugs, which means he's probably emotionally volatile. I relay this to the operator in code. Oh girl, I wish you were here right now. This guy just busted out the coke. You'd love it. He's taking a really big bump. Man after my own heart, etc. Pretty soon I can see these lights from a cop car. So I start waving my hand out the window. At this point I don't care if he's onto me or not. I don't know if he has a weapon, but I'm slumped down in the seat just in case it gets hot. The cops surround us, get him out of the car, and then, once it's safe, they extract me as well. They zoom me to the hospital and drug test me and evaluate me, and that's where my story ends. On my way to the hospital, as I'm explaining all of this to the officer, I find out this guy's 40-ish years on Earth. He's been in federal prison for 30 of them, for violent offenses. I want people to learn from my mistake. And if nothing else, call 911 and stay on the line. By being drunk and stupid, I got into a car with a violent felon who may have been trying to kidnap me. With some quick thinking of my part and a 911 dispatcher sent from the gods above, I'm okay. I don't have much of a way to prove anything, but I did have some texts I sent to my friends, as well as me in the hospital. There are also some pics of me vaguely being bruised and it forming from where he physically grabbed me, trying to get the phone out of my hand at one point. But I'll never get back into someone's car without finding out who they are or knowing them beforehand. So that's my story. Don't do what I did. This happened about a year ago. I was visiting a friend in the city, about an hour train ride away from where I lived. It was getting late, and the last train was going to leave in less than an hour. My friends lived about 10 minutes away from the train station by car, so I let them know I'd need a ride soon. My friend who offered to drive me earlier that day was too drunk, so he ordered me an Uber to come get me. Normally I would just stay the night, but I was pregnant and in my first trimester, and I just needed the comfort of my boyfriend's bed. We had some time, so as he ordered the first one, he sees the picture of the driver and cancels it because the man looks quote-unquote creepy. The second one didn't look much better than the last. He seemed less creepy than the first one. The irony is Riddick. He arrived shortly after. I get in the car and he says my friend's name, who is a man, and I tell him that he'd just paid for it, but that it was the right person. He asked my name and if my friend was my boyfriend. I tell him my first name and that, no, my friend isn't my boyfriend. He's just a friend. He compliments me and I thank him and try to put my headphones in, but he continues to talk to me about how I deserve a boyfriend or something along those lines. Now I must say, I know the city very well. I've lived there before and I spent a lot of time there. I know exactly how to get to the train station, and I always know the best routes based on the time I've been here. It's pretty late on a weekday, so there wasn't any traffic really, and pretty much any way that he took was the right direction that would get me there. He puts the directions in his GPS that's propped up on his dash. It tells him to make a left at the next street, which is what you'd have to do to get there since it's a dead end. We start moving, and he suddenly asks if cops hang out here. I feel a little uncomfortable, but I figure he just wants to speed a little, so I said not really. And he suddenly takes a right into a narrow alley before the left ahead. His GPS is telling him to turn around, but he's still heading the opposite direction. I tell him this isn't the right way, and he suddenly starts listening to the GPS like it was just a mistake. So he says, "I'll get you there if you don't mind me speeding." I'm thinking what the fuck ever, Just get me to the train. So I say, sure. And he immediately slams his foot onto the pedal and reaches 50 to 60 miles per hour before slamming on his brakes at a stop sign ahead. It's the residential part of the city, and the speed limit wouldn't have been anything over 25 miles per hour, with stop signs in every block. He continues to do this following the directions for 2 blocks, when he blatantly ignores the GPS and starts heading in the opposite direction again. At this point, I'm fully aware he doesn't intend to take me to the train, and I'm texting my friends telling them the situation. They tell me to come back. It had been almost 10 minutes and we had just gone through circles. But I'm in a desperate need of comfort, so I'm trying to say, I'm going to be late for my train. This isn't the right way. He tells me I won't be late for my train, even though he has no idea when it's coming. We go through a light and there's a new Camaro behind us, riding his ass because that's just how people drive around here. And he starts asking why the cops are following him. I didn't say anything, but he keeps asking me and gets louder and louder every time. I don't answer in between him mumbling to himself. Eventually, the cop car turns. He calms down and I notice the time. 15 minutes had passed at this point, and I wasn't even a mile away from my friend's house. I'm definitely not going to make this train, so I just tell him, just please take me back. But he insists I'll make this train. I was fed up and got pissy with him about the time and told him that he was going to have to take me back. He finally obligated, and only after slowing down, almost coming to a complete stop in the intersection, next to the bus stop, where a girl was standing by herself. He probably noticed my phone buzzing and lighting up, so he finally, calmly took me back, which was down the street, to my friend's house. My friends were standing at the door when I got out of the car, so I walked up to the door. When I looked back, I see him stopped in his car, down the street, talking to the hooded person standing on the sidewalk. Then they looked over to me. My guess is he probably thought I was a tourist. I had a giant backpack and a little bag with me from the night before, and he could have taken advantage of me. So I reported it to the Uber and the local Uber drivers page in the city, hoping that this will never happen to anyone else. I hope that this was just some coincidence, but the fact that this person, standing on the sidewalk in a hood, turned and looked at me definitely gives me the chills. I'm hoping this never happens to anyone. God only knows what he was planning on doing, but I'm glad I got out of there.
A few months ago, I was quick added on Snapchat by some girl who had a normal-looking Bitmoji and was fairly new to Snapchat. Her Snap score was only about 400 or 500 if I remember correctly. I accepted the request since I could always use some more friends. I was kind of a loner, and I enjoyed doing streaks. She almost immediately texted me. Despite the request being about 6 hours old, she texted me, "Hey cutie, what's up?" I was a bit confused by this message, as she had never seen a picture of me yet, and Bitmojis aren't necessarily accurate. I just replied, "Hello," and the conversation continued normally for about 10 to 15 minutes. Eventually, she sent a picture of herself. I was a little surprised by it, as she looked exactly like one of my girlfriend's friends that I had met on a night out one time. I simply dismissed it as being coincidental. People often have some who look similar to themselves. She requested a picture of me, and I sent her a simple selfie of me. Again, she referred to me as being cute, but it wasn't as weird this time, because now she had actually seen me. I just thought at first she was just being nice. She started flirting with me, even after I brought up how I had a girlfriend. She would say stuff like, "I wish you didn't have a girlfriend. You seem sweet and cute, and the color of your eyes is making my heart flush." She would even get sexually explicit with some of her compliments. Out of nowhere, she sends me 2 more selfies of her. This time, they were 2 pictures of other women I had only met once or twice in my life. One of them was my girlfriend's other friend, and another was an old classmate of mine from 8th grade. Assuming it was my girlfriend doing some stupid loyalty test on me, I just said,
Nice try, Aurora. Not my girl's real name. You should know after 2 years of dating, I'd never cheat on you. After I said this, she sent me a picture of yet another girl I hardly knew and said, "Who the fuck is Aurora?" Freaked out a bit now, I asked who she really was. She got really pissy with me, saying how every new person she meets accuses her of being some catfish because she always looks like somebody else they know. I asked her if she had some more pictures of herself, just to see if I'm not losing my mind or something, and she sends me 5 more, each of yet another girl. I knew this time some of them were a bit closer to me. She was still insistent of it being her, and promising she isn't a catfish. After about 10 minutes of me pursuing this catfish into giving herself up, she sent me a heart-chilling snap. It was a picture of the front of my old house, where I moved away from about 3 to 4 years before this incident. It was taken the same time of day as this conversation was happening, so I assumed that she had taken it at the very moment. I now knew it couldn't be my girlfriend, just being creepy, as we weren't dating when I lived there. Nor did she even know who I was. I figured it was just a friend of mine just pulling some random sick prank with an alternate account. But some of the photos they used were of girls that they didn't even know about. All of these girls were acquaintances of mine. She followed it up with several pictures of another girl. This time they weren't just normal selfies or group photos. They were candid shots of nobody other than my girlfriend. Some of them were of her sitting at the stoplight in her car. Others were of her walking into school we go to, and my heart dropped. I blocked this person immediately and phoned my girlfriend to tell her the situation. She assured me that it wasn't her or one of her friends doing some kind of prank or loyalty test, and she didn't know somebody had been taking photos of her. I haven't been added by anyone similar of nature or heard from that account ever again. I still have no idea who that was behind it. My friends that I or Aurora still had contact with have since privated all of their Instagram accounts, which is where these pictures that this account had gotten them from. And my girlfriend and I have disabled our snap maps to everyone, including our closest friends. I still want to believe that this was just some chick trying to prank me or one of my best friends or something, and not just some genuinely creepy person who was trying to stalk me and my girlfriend. It's been a little bit now since all this transpired, and nothing has come from it. I hope it stays that way. Rachel and her best friend Claire were walking home from school one day, and they were taking selfies on Snapchat and posting them onto their stories. Rachel stupidly had her Snapchat location on and forgot all about it. When Rachel and Claire went their separate ways, by going to their houses, Rachel got a snap from some person she didn't know, and so she blocked that person and went on with her day. Later that night, she got a snap, but with the same unknown username as before. So she sighed, and then she opened the snap. Rachel looked at the snap in horror as she saw a picture of her house in his snap. Rachel asked the guy how in the hell did he know where she lived, and the guy responded back with, "You have your Snapchat location on. And by the way, you and your friend look very beautiful walking home today from school." Rachel's heart began to race as she turned off her Snapchat location and began texting her friend Claire about what happened. Minutes later, Rachel got a snap from the guy again, and she opened it and screamed at the top of her lungs in terror. The snap of was him holding a gun towards Claire's head and shooting her in the skull multiple times. Rachel showed them the snap that she had gotten when they got to her house. They found Claire's body in her basement, and the guy was never to be seen. But what was left behind was the gun that he used to shoot Claire with. To this day, Rachel deleted Snapchat and started to be more careful from now on. The case is still unsolved. Sam was young and only 13, and still in middle school. A girl that he really liked had just recently started snapping him. They started messaging each other for a few nights. At nearly 1 p.m. in the afternoon, he was watching TV when the girl sent her sitting on her bed. So Sam opened it, excited, and saw a picture of her. And then he sent a message saying, "What's up?" She sent the identical picture, again, this time with a caption saying, "Not much, you." She set a timer for 10 seconds, so it gave Sam plenty of time to analyze the picture, including her bedroom and background. And then he suddenly noticed there was a dark outline of a person standing by the window. Sam quickly responded, "Is that your brother in the window?" She sent another picture, this time captioned, "What do you mean?" In this picture, he was a lot more closer, and he could see that the hands were pressed up against the glass. He closed the snap before the timer even ran out, so he could tell her quicker. He wrote, "There's somebody in your window. Turn around." She opened his snap immediately, and he didn't see her again in the app. He grew more worried as the minutes passed. He sent many messages and even tried to call her a few times. Sam didn't know her house phone number. It wasn't until midnight when he was laying in his bed, and suddenly, she texted him back. She explained to him the whole situation. As soon as she looked at the window, she saw a person standing there. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, and it caused the person, who turned out to be a 20-something-year-old man, to open the window and jumped into the room. She ran to her parents' room and woke up her dad, who entered her room to find nothing but an open window. The man was gone, without a trace. It wasn't actually a personal story of him, but it freaks him out nonetheless, knowing that the only thing that saved his friend from whatever bad could have happened was the fact he was able to see the window through the selfies. The guy was never caught. I guess you could say that they definitely got nightmares from that. Thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to let me know in the comment section below. Also, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications so you get the videos immediately when they come out. Make sure to check out the links in the description. My Twitter, Instagram, everything is in there. If you want to give me a follow or find out when the videos are coming out earlier than they usually do, that is the best way to find out. Make sure to submit your stories, because I really do want to tell some subscriber stories. I feel like it would be a lot more interesting, just experiencing some of the people that actually listen to me tell me their stories. Other than that, stay safe, stay scary, and I'll see you in the next one.